Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Braca Fiercewelt, the 13th, actually. My notes are wrong. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Fistandantilus Reborn by Douglas Niles. I would like to take a moment, thank the DL Saga members, and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the link in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate links. Now, this is my perspective, and if yours differs, that's okay. Put your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching this after the live stream, or if you're watching this during the live stream, put them in the live chat. Say hi. All right, I know it's early. I didn't give anyone any notice, so I don't expect anyone to be here. All this is to say, I like reviewing these books. They're a lot of fun. I don't really have time to sit down and do the pre-written review, and so this is just going to be me off the cuff, reflecting on what I remember from the book because I listened to it in my commute to work this past week. And I've already started another book, and so the last thing actually, and so my memory might be a little bit hazy, but I'm going to do my best. Now, this is about Fistandantilus. Kind of. So the book, I think Douglas Niles, this is like his worst book. And if memory serves, he's not one of those really great authors. He's just prolific. He's been doing Dragonlance novels and stories and modules for so long that we just reflect fondly and we forgive him for some of his foibles, I will say. But this book in particular, it went off the rails at like the 2/3 mark, and it just stayed off the rails until the very end. And it was very, very odd the way that it was sort of put together. But let me try to frame this. So we start the novel with some backstory about Fistandantilus and addressing the River of Time and the fact that Raistlin Magir is tied to Fistandantilus in a timeline. But we have to remember, before Raistlin Magir was born, the whole scope of Fistandantilus' life existed. And so this novel specifically is addressing the fact that Fistandantilus' story is changed twice, and so we have the original where he dies in Skullcap, and Skullcap is created trying to get into the Abyss and challenge the Queen of Darkness. And then we have that part in the modules where the heroes are coming up and enter Skullcap after they've freed the slaves from Pax Starkaz, and there's a remnant lich, or a sort of a spirit essence of Fistandantilus that is still existing that they have to deal with. But after that point, until the end of the Blue Ladies' War, when Raistlin, goes back in time, Fistandantilus' story ended right then. But because we have the whole Raistlin Magir thing, it completely changes everything about Fistandantilus when he actually ended in Istar. This book is saying, okay, we understand all that convoluted history and life experience of Fistandantilus. We're going to ignore the entire part of Raistlin Magir and only tangentially address that, yes, that stuff happened. And instead, we're going to focus solely on Fistandantilus before he was killed in Istar by Raistlin and sort of absorbed in him-ish. It's very strange stuff. Okay, so Fistandantilus' life, he's one of the most powerful archmages of all time in Krynn. No one really knows how old he is by the time Istar falls. They just know that he's been around since everyone's memory, and he's been incredibly powerful that whole time. And so, there's a lot of sort of secondary stories about how Fistandantilus reached out to the Queen of Darkness to get the Bloodstone, and that was actually a gift from her, and how he uses that to extend his life. So we know that he's been extending his life through the Bloodstone and through other poor mages that are just suffering because they go to him to learn from him. And he's a great teacher. He's incredibly powerful, so he can share a lot of really great information. But if you're too good, then he sucks your life force out of you and you die, and he prolongs his own life that way. But other mages do actually successfully learn from him and move on, which is a fascinating idea. You could be a student of Fistandantilus's and you didn't die at all. You just learned from the most powerful wizard in all of Krynn. and you just moved on about your life. That's a crazy notion when we're faced with the Fistandantilus. This is like this monstrous lich creature, right? Okay, so we go through the history of him hitting the portal, and then, of course, that exploding all of Zaman and creating Skullcap. And what are left behind is the Bloodstone Pendant, because it was not destroyed in the blast, and his skull, remnants of Fistandantilus' skull. Now, before Fistandantilus died and did all of this, before Istar fell, he knew he wanted to prolong his life in case this didn't work. And so he created this potion and he gave it to one of his apprentices, saying, look, if you are ever in a moment when you know you're going to die, drink this potion, and this potion will preserve your life. And his student was like, yeah, thanks, boss, and went about his life. Okay, so, Fistandantilus' life goes on and whatever. So the wizard that he gave that to goes on to live an incredibly powerful, long-lasting life, and becomes insanely powerful. And then he ends up threatening this guy with his wife, and he takes his wife anyway because he wants him to do work for him. And the guy refuses because he's a good dude. And this mage upsets him so much that the guy goes and confronts the mage, and he's going to beat his ass and kill him. He actually gets to the point where he's going to kill him. The mage drinks the potion, thinks it's going to extend his life. It doesn't actually extend his life. And then he dies. So, and I think he actually had the Bloodstone too. At this point in the timeline, he had the Bloodstone. So, the mage dies, doesn't understand why, clearly he should have existed. But the potion that he drank is what triggers everything else moving forward. And it doesn't even explain this until the very end of the book, which again is part of the convoluted nature of this storytelling. So we're left with this weird early MacGuffin of a potion that's supposed to bring back Fistandantilus if he dies, and nothing happens with that potion at all until the very, very end when it's explained. So then we're cutting forward in time, and we're dealing with Zaman and Skullcap, and this is it talks about how the heroes go into Skullcap, and they encounter Lich, and then they move on to Thorbarden, and ultimately a dwarf and a kender decide to sort of stumble on each other as they're just sort of exploring Skullcap, and one of them connects with the skull of Fistandantilus, and the other one connects with the bloodstone of Fistandantilus, and they're inextricably linked together because the essence that was preserved in time of Fistandantilus is preserved in both of those two artifacts. And so one of the artifacts is trying to reconnect with the other one, and the dwarf ends up staying there, waiting because Fistandantilus can't get his full power together until these two artifacts get together. And the dwarf tried to kill the kender, which caused the kender to run away. And then the dwarf is sort of like Gollum, just sort of hanging out in Skullcap until after the War of the Lance. And this is about 20 to 25 years after the War of the Lance. The timeline's a little timey-wimey because, if we're being honest, second generation and stuff happened, but the whole Chaos War timeline didn't happen yet, I don't think. And so the authors aren't addressing the Fifth Age, but they're talking about time that should be in the Fifth Age, or at least very, very close to it. So Dragon claims this area, finds the dwarf, kills the dwarf, finds the skull, and is sort of taken over by the skull a little bit. Then we're sort of cut to the bloodstone is taken by, I'm trying to remember here, the essence of Fistandantilus. So the skull that had Fistandantilus' essence in it was smacked into the kender's head, and that is what actually made Fistandantilus' essence seep into the kender. I'm not making this up. And so that's what causes the kender to run away, and part of the essence from the skull is now split in two. One part's in the skull, the dragon now has, and the other part is in the kender, preserving the kender's life off in the distance. The old wizard that was killed that drank the potion, the bloodstone that he had was now taken up by some other half-elf, and he ends up running a whole seeker religion faction in Haven during the War of the Lance, during the Dragon High Lord coming over, and the Dragon High Lord armies end up sort of making a deal with him because he's clearly powerful. And then he goes off and becomes a brigand, and he lives for hundreds of years through the cataclysm, and then of course into the War of the Lance and stuff. And it's all wrapped around this idea that Fistandantilus, part of his essence is in the bloodstone that's preserving this half-elf brigand's life now. Part of his essence is split between the skull and this kender, and they're off doing their own misadventures. And it talks about all these different misadventures that all these people are having. The skull is now in control by a dragon. The kender has part of Fistandantilus, and this half-elf brigand has the other part. And all three of these pieces are trying to get together. And it's all done through the lens of a aesthetic of Gilthanas. He's like trying to be a priest of Gilthanas, and he's going around and he's doing his best to collect up the history of Fistandantilus. And there's like rumors of this cult of Fistandantilus, that this seeker religious guy who's been living for hundreds of years since the cataclysm, that he in fact is a priest of Fistandantilus, which causes this priest of Gilthanas to go down there and start recording history, because the priests aren't supposed to be around. There's no magic anywhere. And he sees that he actually creates miracles using the bloodstone of Fistandantilus, but really it's just the power of the bloodstone that would normally preserve its wearer is being pushed out to whomever he's trying to bless, making it appear to be a god. So there's this whole turn of Fistandantilus is actually now a god, which makes no sense, which is all crazy. Hey, Marco, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in live, by the way. All right, so if it's not convoluted enough, we now focus on the priest and him stumbling into a bunch of different types of people. And the story just follows him in his misadventures of searching for the full story of the history of Fistandantilus, through the rumors of this priest, and then also through the rumors of Skullcap. And it all comes back together finally when the kender meets up with this priest, the brigand meets up with the priest and the kender, and they all end up going finally back to Zaman. And once the two parts of the skull and the kender's part of Fistandantilus come together, and then the bloodstone come together, we're dealing with two different timelines of Fistandantilus. We have the bloodstone Fistandantilus, which came from the actual Fistandantilus. And then we have the skull Fistandantilus, which came from after Raistlin had already killed him and found him in here. After Raistlin had found him in here, after Pax Tharkaz, but then before Raistlin goes back to take over Fistandantilus. So these two parts of Fistandantilus of two different timelines are released, and the bloodstone splits in two. These two essences come out of it, and we have the Lich Fistandantilus and we have the living Fistandantilus, and they start battling each other in front of all these other people who were just sort of happenstance trapped together in this weird event because of Fistandantilus's machinations. This battle goes on forever. It finally concludes with both of them being sent off in time together to then be reawoken, and in some centuries later, like weird resurrection spiral that had been started from this point. So Fistandantilus came back alive, two of them. They were battling each other, created massive magical forces that sucked them into a void into the future timeline. So any DM who at any time in the Age of Mortals or afterward wants to say that Fistandantilus, two versions of him, come back, or one of the other versions, or they meld together or something, you can do that. Because in this timeline, Fistandantilus did escape Raistlin's machinations and actually exist into the future of the River of Time. It's very, very crazy and just sort of hurts your head trying to make any sense of it. But that's this novel. That's the whole novel. And I don't even know why we even had the dragon. I mean, it was just a sort of side story. The whole kender being hit on the head with the skull and having part of the soul of Fistandantilus seep into him and preserve his life for 100 years was also a weird thing I don't think you even really needed. Focusing on two versions of Fistandantilus, totally unnecessary and weird. I really do think that they should have just had... Look, when Raistlin defeated Fistandantilus in Legends, which would be back during the time of Istar, part of his essence was preserved by the Queen of Darkness in the Abyss. Now, whether she has full knowledge of the whole timeline of the River of Time or not, it seems like she doesn't because, of course, Raistlin murdered her in one of them. I think she would know enough that his defeat by Raistlin Majir, who traveled back in time, bodes ill for her. And so it would make logical sense that she would preserve him as a defense mechanism against Raistlin if he did, in fact, try to step to her, right? Because Fistandantilus is the only reason why Raistlin became as powerful as he did in the first place. So then we can have the old version of Fistandantilus in spirit form of some sort, or maybe he's still a lich or something in the Abyss. And then Raistlin moves forward, and then when Raistlin ends up sacrificing himself in the Abyss, his version of Fistandantilus that will be discovered when he's young again in the skull cap from the actual skull and bones themselves, those two could actually merge into one, or those two could be the two that battle each other, or there's other ways of doing it, but it was all set off by the potion being drunk and having part of the lich's essence go into this student of Fistandantilus and into the bloodstone, which then propelled his younger self forward. Crazy stuff. And I've read it, and I thought I understood it until I started explaining it, and it makes less sense as I explain it than it did when I was reading it. And even when I was reading it, it didn't make much sense. So anyway, that is this book. Weird, wacky adventure that doesn't give Fistandantilus really any due, in my opinion, because he's supposed to be the most powerful wizard of all time. And he was defeated by Raistlin Majir, and so there's the two most powerful wizards of all time. I wish they would have focused on that battle, or at least addressed it in a little bit more detail. It would have been nice if Fistandantilus's whole arc of traveling through time would have been much clearly outlined. It would have been nice if Fistandantilus, when the Lich version and the Young version met and battled, if they didn't just go into a wormhole of space-time. It would have been nice if he actually came back and existed as an ancient Lich or something, or was preserved as his younger self after having, merged with the Lich. But to have them come back and then just go away again for some future storyline that obviously was never revealed, why? What's the purpose of that? Why even write the book in the first place? It's called Fistandantilus Reborn, not Fistandantilus Reborn into and then whisked off into the future. So what the hell? So of course, like all the other Dragonlance covers, or almost all of them, this actually never really happens in it. There is the whole green mist was actually the Bloodstone releasing the two versions of Fistandantilus. That's what this green mist was. And I guess that's supposed to be the human that's posing as a kender in this on the cover, because the kender was actually a boy, and there was a human with fake ears to pretend that she was a kender. So I don't know. It was very strange. Sounds like it was kind of wasted potential. Shame. Hey, Arcade, thanks for tuning in. I wouldn't say entirely wasted potential, because it gives us the ability to bring Fistandantilus back, which is an exciting prospect. What if one version of it... Because let's be honest about this. Whether you're writing it in a story or you're playing it out in your home games through D&D or something, Fistandantilus is more powerful than Lord Soth. I mean, Lord Soth almost bowed down to Raistlin Majir. So Raistlin's more powerful. So, you can sort of see if Fistandantilus is the one that granted Raistlin all of his power, then Fistandantilus is the most powerful. So players can't overcome that. And what type of story are you going to write where anyone could actually stand up to Fistandantilus? You can't, because he's just way too powerful. And so the best way to use him is to use either his living form or his lich form to come in, be a huge menace, have the heroes have to find a way to bring his other form back into the timeline, and then they defeat each other again. So that would be the sort of leverage of the story, because heroes as players or heroes in a story are not going to be able to stand up against Fistandantilus. Only he can. I think that might be the most interesting way to do it. And arguably, I could see a way of bringing Fistandantilus into my Tyranny of Dragons actual play, now that I'm thinking about it. I was starting to get bored of this sort of stale narrative storytelling of that module, and so I sort of put it on hold. I put it on the shelf, and we're sort of pausing it for a while. But now that I'm actually thinking about bringing in a Fistandantilus Lich or a young Fistandantilus as one of the main endpoints, that could be really, really interesting storytelling. Because what if this cult, and I don't know how much, I've changed the version of Tyranny of Dragons to suit Dragonlance and to be much more ingrained into the 5th Age of Krynn. And so the cult is not actually its own thing. It's actually a spin-off of some other movement that I'm going to be dealing with in the game when I eventually go back to it. But what if they are split in two, right? One side of them is trying to bring back Fistandantilus because the Queen of Darkness is dead. And the other side is actually trying to bring back the Queen of Darkness because they think they can actually resurrect her. And so the whole Tyranny of Dragons timeline is to bring Tiamat back into the world, right? What if they brought in Takesis, like they resurrected her, and the only person that can stand up to her is someone like Fistandantilus? And so you have to work these two factions against each other to either stop them from bringing back Takesis or stop them from bringing back Fistandantilus. And however the heroes make their choices, one or the other might come back into real life and become like the new BBEG for the Age of Mortals into the future of Krynn. That could be really interesting. Ooh. And if the heroes are actually working both sides against each other, then you could watch this massive end battle and try to survive as viewers trying to escape the magical forces. Oh, that could be really, really interesting. Oh, I like that a lot. This is how my brain works. Sorry. I just spiral. The idea of bringing them in your game sounds awesome. Yeah, I think it could be something very fun. All right. Well, look, the novel was not the greatest. It's certainly not the worst Dragonlance novel I've ever read. If you like Fistandantilus, I definitely recommend it. If you like, sort of timelines and time travel in Dragonlance, I think you should give it a go because it revisits all of our familiar War of the Lance timelines, pre-Cataclysm timelines, post-War of the Lance timelines, before the Age of Mortals. So that's all interesting. And it presents you with an opportunity of using Fistandantilus in your own storytelling, which before you could have done it anyway, who cares? But now it's actually, I say now as if it was released now, and it's not. Of course, this has been around for decades. But yeah, I kind of dig it. So read it. I don't know how to end this. So that is going to do it for my review of Fistandantilus Reborn by Douglas Niles. What do you think of Fistandantilus's weird timeline story arc? Do you think there should have been two versions of him, or do you think they should have merged into one super evil bad guy? And do you think he should have been thrown into space-time at the very end? Do we waste the entire middle of this novel not talking about him, but instead talking about all the world around him? Let me know in the comments below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you so very much for joining in that celebration. So until next time for Dragonlance Saga, my name's Adam. Slanjavar.